to me, it boils down to parental rights. But the left that's supporting this doesn't want to have that conversation because they know that a parental rights conversation will cross party lines. Because when it comes to a parent protecting their kid, political affiliation goes out the window. So they don't want to have that conversation. So they instead focus on, if you're opposed to this bill, you hate transgender people, you hate transgender kids, you want transgender kids to kill themselves, and you're just an awful right-wing troll. And we saw that yesterday when this finally passed, from the bill's architect, Washington State Senator Marco Elias. Senate Bill 5599 is officially heading to the governor's desk for his signature. This bill has been the subject of widespread misinformation, but it is simply about protecting youth in crises and making sure they have access to safe, stable shelter, because who would not want that? And you might note there at the bottom of his tweet, he says, "Read more below." So you might be wondering, well, what does he want me to read? What institution of journalism is he putting out there on his Twitter thread for people to read about the real facts behind Senate Bill 5599? Well, the institution of journalism that he's linking to is none other than The Stranger, Seattle's alt-weekly newspaper, far-left rag that is genuinely obsessed with me, and I feel like they should actually have me on their payroll because they simply write about me so much. And they write, and again, they hold this up as a fact check. It's titled, "No, Washington did not just pass a law allowing the state to kidnap and transgenderify children." And in it, they write, "Conservative figures, politicians, and far-right groups such as Conservative Ladies of Washington, detrans activist Ollie London, Washington Representative Leonard Christian, Representative Jim Walsh, and Brandi Kruse say Senate Bill 5599 infringes on parental rights." Yes, I have said that, and I firmly believe, and I don't know how, if you read the bill, you can argue that it infringes on parental rights. The Stranger goes on to say, "They assert that the state of Washington is now free to kidnap, disappear, and transgenderify children without the knowledge or consent of their loving parents, who would be left confused, heartbroken, and financially responsible for any and all costs." And I will say about that quote, I have never argued that the state of Washington will kidnap and disappear your kids. I have never argued that the state of Washington will transgendify your kids. So, Nicole, if you want to stash that away, because that actually might be the basis for a lawsuit, because I've never claimed any of those things. Now, I have claimed that Senate Bill 5599 does amount to government-sanctioned kidnapping of your kids. And no, I haven't said that the state of Washington is going to come in and kidnap your kids. But when you don't know where your child is, and the state of Washington has given an outside entity the legal authority to hide your child's location from you, yes, I do believe that amounts to government-sanctioned kidnapping of your kids. But no, I've never said that the state of Washington is going to transgendify your children. And so I really hope The Stranger, we should ask them for a retraction on that, because I've never had that argument at all.
I also want them to add podcast host or undivided host, because everybody else...
Give us some attention.
Yeah, everybody else gets a, "This is who this is," before their name. Did you notice
listen,
that?
The Stranger writes about me so often.
Yeah, you're like Madonna.
That, I think that they
name.
just, and now all their readers know, right?
Could just be Brandi.
Now, before I completely destroy The Stranger's article, as if anyone thinks it actually needs to be destroyed, I think the fact that The Stranger wrote it is just, I think that just speaks for itself, that it's probably going to be inaccurate or deeply, deeply flawed, which it is. And I've just pointed to one example of it being inaccurate. But I thought I had to read this tweet from Jim Walsh, which actually speaks to the title of today's episode. The title of today's episode is "Lumped In with the Riffraff." And that's because Representative Jim Walsh sent out a tweet about this, and he felt bad for me. He said, "The fourth best alt weekly in Seattle does what it does, spin desperately, disparage conservatives, and then quote a bunch of extreme left activists. Also, poor Brandi Kruse, lumped in with the riffraff." Look, I'm happy to be lumped in with anyone who wants to question Senate Bill 5599, who wants to question it on its merits, on the necessity of it, and on, yes, the fact that it is an affront to parental rights. Again, I have not in any setting argued or made this an argument about transgender issues. I go back to the fact that Democrats want to make it about right-wing hating trans, and I'm not saying that the other people that are mentioned in this article haven't. I don't know the extent of what they tweeted out about it. But personally, for me, I have not made this an issue of transgender surgeries, transgender care, transgender rights in the slightest. In fact, I have made a concerted effort to do the opposite of that and to make it an issue over and over of parental rights. Again, we can have a separate conversation, and we've had it on the podcast, about my view on gender affirming care, as they call it, is that parents have a right to be involved. That's it. Now, I'm going to get to some of the claims that the Stranger makes in this article, but I will just note that the Stranger is not the only, and I won't even call them a news entity. It's kind of like a blog with an opinion, hard opinion slant. Como News, Como, I was really disappointed to see Como News take the bait on this and really pick up the Democratic talking points on this being sort of a far-right misinformation campaign where, information is being distorted. In a Como article, it says, viral posts falsely claimed the bill would result in children being legally taken from their parents if they did not consent to their child's gender transition. Now, look, this is a matter of semantics. What people are saying, and look, I haven't seen every single tweet on the internet. Might there be some, off-the-wall claims that you're going to legally lose your parental rights? Sure. But this is about not knowing and not being told where your child is. And I'm sorry, if my kid is somewhere sanctioned by the state and I'm not allowed to know their location, then yeah, my parental rights have been infringed. And so you can claim that that's not legally taking kids from their parents, but you're failing to see the nuance in the conversation. And you just want to say, oh, that's false, as opposed to having a nuanced conversation about what the bill actually does and what the effect of the bill can be on a parent who's left not knowing where their child is when the state knows where your child is. So back to that Stranger article. And I will just say that the Stranger, again, fails. They don't want to have a nuanced conversation about Senate Bill 5599. But also, their fact check is just factually inaccurate. And it's sort of, it relies on picking and choosing their words carefully to try to make a point. So let me read an example. In one paragraph of the Stranger article, it says, the changes are simple. A shelter can now notify the Washington Department of Child, Youth, and Families before the parents of the young people in these cases, which increases the state's involvement with young people. They say that like it's a good thing. That's kind of the problem. It does not eliminate requirements to notify parents, and it is specifically intended to reunify children with their families. Okay. The Stranger says it does not eliminate requirements to notify parents. Again, no one is claiming that parents aren't going to be notified. What we're saying and what the bill says is that parents are not going to be told where their child is. If you're a parent and your child has gone missing, and you get a call from the Department of Child, Youth, and Families, and you say, hey, your child is at a shelter, does that help? Sure. But as a parent, they're still not going to tell you, and they're not mandated under this law to tell you what shelter that is, where your child might be. And that is still immensely, immensely problematic. Now, here's what I'll say about what I think you should do, and I'm going to go through some of this. At this point, with this much back and forth, finger pointing, labels of misinformation that aren't really misinformation, an inability from the media to have a nuanced conversation about the implications of Senate Bill 5599, at this point, my advice to you would be just to go read the bill. The bill is 10 pages long. It's truly not that long. And with so much conflicting information from politicians, from the media, podcast hosts, just go read the bill. That is the surest way for you to get directly to the source and to formulate your own interpretation of what the intent of the bill is and what the implications of the bill are. But again, I'll read just some passages from it, and I'll even reference the page number so that you, when you go to the bill, can read this for yourself. So again, one of the arguments here is that this isn't hiding kids from their parents. Under the law right now, if your child shows up for a bevy of reasons to a shelter, the shelter has to call your parents. But what the law is doing is it's carving out exceptions, one of them being if your child shows up to seek protected health care, like gender care, for instance, or reproductive care. So the bill says, this is page 2, if there are compelling reasons not to notify the parent, the shelter or organization must instead notify the department, and they're referring to the Department of Children and Family Services. Compelling reasons. The law expands the definition of compelling reasons. It says compelling reasons include, this is now page 3, but are not limited to, when a minor is seeking or receiving protected health care services. It says protected health care services means gender-affirming treatment as defined under the law, and reproductive health care services as defined under existing law. So again, that's very clear. If there are compelling reasons not to notify the parent, I've just told you what the law says those compelling reasons can be, then the shelter must instead notify the state, the Department of Children and Family Services. So again, someone's going to be notified. At this point, it is still not the parent. It is still not the parent who's going to be notified. So what then is the responsibility of the Department of Children and Family Services at that point, that they've gotten the call from a shelter saying, hey, there's a compelling reason, they're here to seek gender-affirming care under the law, then we're not calling the parents, we're calling you, so now we're calling you. So what then does the department have to do? Again, under the bill, this is page 3. It says, when the department receives a report under subsection 1 of this section for a minor who is seeking or receiving protected healthcare services, it shall offer to make referrals on behalf of the minor for appropriate behavioral health services and offer services designed to resolve the conflict and accomplish a reunification of the family. Okay. So nowhere in there does it require there to be a movement toward reunification. It simply says that the state will offer services designed to hopefully resolve the conflict. Now, a child who ran away from home, how willing do you think that child is going to be to accept those services that will result in reunification with their family? Again, you're leaving the ball in the court of that child to decide, do they want to be reunified with their parent? And that is part of the problem. It also says that when the department receives a report under subsection 1 of this section, it shall make a good faith attempt to notify the parent that a report has been received and offer services designed to resolve the conflict and accomplish a reunification of the family. It shall make a good faith attempt to notify the parent. What is a good faith attempt? It doesn't define it. What is a good faith attempt to notify a parent? You make one phone call, if they don't answer, that's it? And nowhere in this bill does it say that the state, when they receive a report of a child showing up at a shelter to seek protected health care, nowhere in the bill does it say the state has to notify the parent of the child's location. Nowhere in the bill, because it's not a requirement of the bill, and that is the crux of the issue. The vast majority of the pushback over this has been the state knowing where your child is and refusing to tell you and not giving you your child's location. That's it. So any of these fact checks that want to take issue with that are simply false. Nowhere in the bill, 10 pages. Again, I encourage you to read it yourself. Don't trust me. Don't trust Como. Don't trust the stranger. For the love of God, don't trust Senator Mark Elias. Trust your own instincts and your own intelligence, and please go read all 10 pages of Senate Bill 5599. And genuinely, I feel bad for the public. I feel bad for the public, the amount of conflicting information there has been on this bill, in the fact that you can no longer trust people who claim to be fact-checking information for you. I feel bad that the public doesn't have that anymore, and that you have to go read 10 pages of the bill to know what's going on with your family, what could happen with your kids, what your rights are as a parent. But that is the sad state of things, and that's where it's come down to. So I encourage you to read the bill for yourself, make your own determination, and also don't feed into the fear-mongering that if you don't agree with this bill, you're a bad parent, you're an abusive parent, you're right-wing, you're a tool of right-wing misinformation, you're anti-transgender. You know who you are. Read the bill, decide how you feel about it. and ignore any sort of labels that someone like Senator Mark Elias or the folks at The Stranger want to assign to you. And The Stranger, we will be reaching out for a correction and a retraction. And if we don't get one, then we'll decide where to go from there. How does that sound?